Welcome to English Module number 5, Skills and their Application. In this section, we'll be covering some more skills used in writing and practice applying them in our papers. So we will cover number 1, how to use transition and logic to connect your points and your conclusions of your paragraphs towards a final conclusion in your papers. Number 2, how to analyze and edit your own as well as other people's papers. And number 3, how to use diversity in your writing to avoid unnecessary repetition in your papers. Welcome to Module 5A, Transitions. In this module, we will cover the proper use of logic to connect the main ideas of a paper together towards a conclusion. This will primarily take the form of proper use of transitional phrases to link paragraphs together. We will talk about 1, what is logic? 2, what are the different types of transitions? And 3, how to implement transitions between paragraphs. So let's dive in. So first, we have to define and understand what logic is. Irving and Cohen described logic in their book, Introduction to Logic, as the study of methods and principles used to distinguish correct reasoning from incorrect reasoning. That is to say, to use logic is to use the proper methods in order to establish, through the use of reason, something that is true. Much of your papers will require you to research a subject and argue for something. Functionally, what you are trying to do is find the truth and then argue via logic to establish the truth in the mind of your readers. Although we do not have time to look at the various methods and principles of logic, we can look at some specific examples of logic. When making an argument, one starts with the facts, or at least with information that is presumed to be true, and then reasons from those known facts towards an unknown fact. This is usually your conclusion. Stating the facts, however, is not enough. You have to explain the reason why these facts, when understood together, bring us to new information. Here's an example of how facts can become an argument. Here we have a list of facts. Number 1, covenants often have stipulations attached to them. Number 2, God gave Adam stipulations. Number 3, God gave Noah similar stipulations to those of Adam's. And number 4, God made a covenant with Noah in which these stipulations were a part. And finally, a conclusion, God had a covenant with Adam, just like he had a covenant with Noah. Now, these facts by themselves do not make up an argument. These are pieces that you would use in an argument. Even right now, you're beginning to look at some of these, and your brain's trying to piece together how these facts connect with one another to lead towards this conclusion. Some of you might be thinking already about other facts that might contradict the conclusion here that are not mentioned in this list. That is to say, you are using your logic to try to piece together what the truth is based on the data presented to you. In your paper, you need to supply this reasoning, not just the data. So a paragraph that uses this data might sound something like this. Covenants almost always have some sort of stipulation attached to them. It is clear that God makes a covenant with Noah, and part of that covenant is the stipulation to be fruitful and multiply. Likewise, God had told Adam and Eve to be fruitful and multiply as well. Therefore, one could argue that God had a covenantal relationship with Adam, not only because there are stipulations attached to Adam's relationship with God, that is, to the commandments to be fulfilled, but also because these stipulations mirror what we see in the Noahic covenant, which we know is also a covenant. So we can end up using words like likewise, therefore, not only, but also, and because to help clarify the relationship between these facts and make it clear that our conclusion is true, if indeed our facts and our reasoning hold true. So next, let's look at some specific examples of the different types of transitional phrases and how they can be used to either compare or contrast or various other ways of connecting facts together. There are a few different types of transitional words and phrases that can be used to help clarify your logic in your paper. Some of the different types include additive transitions, transitions that cause conflict or emphasis, concessive transitions, Transitions that indicate the cause or the reason for, or the effect or result of, as well as the purpose. So let's take a look at some examples of these types of words and phrases that are used for these types of transitions. So let's talk about additive transitions. These are words like and, also, furthermore, or additionally. These words indicate that there is or are additional reasons or information that support the same conclusion. So an example of this would be something like, God is merciful. That's your conclusion. He is gracious to those who obey him, and furthermore, he is even gracious to sinners. So we're given two different examples of how God is gracious, and we see that the second one is an additional fact to say it's not just to those who are obedient, but even those who are sinners towards him, that he is gracious towards them to draw them unto himself. And so additive transitions will add additional facts or information that support the same conclusion. Next, transitions that create conflict are words like but, however, yet, or conversely. These words indicate that the following information conflicts or contrasts the previous information. Often these are used to disprove an opposing viewpoint, but some of them can be used to qualify the limits of the conclusion you are arguing for, much like concessive transitions, which we'll talk about in a little bit. An example of this would be something like this. George says he did not eat the cookie. However, you can clearly see that he has chocolate all over his face. So in this example, however functions to give a contrary or a different, contrasting fact that disproves the claim of another. Next, we have transitions that provide emphasis. And these use words or phrases like even more, above all, or indeed. These words draw attention to a given point and highlight it as more important than the rest. These can help you clarify what your strongest arguments are within your paper. For example, Jack loves Jill. They are always together. Indeed, he doesn't talk to anyone else. So the conclusion, Jack loves Jill, is supported by two facts. They're always together, and the fact that Jack does not talk to anyone else but Jill. And that is highlighted by the word indeed to give us the strongest reason they believe that he loves her. Concessive transitions use words like although, in spite of this, and regardless of this. These words indicate that you are conceding, that is, you agree with something even though it may weaken, or at least threaten to weaken, your argument. These words are used as qualifiers to acknowledge counterpoints that temper or balance your conclusion. So an example of this would be, God is love, although he is also holy and still punishes sin. This tempers or balances how we understand God is love. It doesn't mean everyone gets a free pass to do whatever they want. He also is holy, right? Although he is also holy, is a concessive transition. Cause transitions are words or phrases like because of the fact, or for, or since. These indicate the reason or the cause for the previous statement. These are extremely helpful for you clarifying your reasoning because they get down to the root of why this is happening, what caused this. So an example, an easy one would be, we can know that God loves us because of the fact that Jesus came and died for us. It is clearly linking the conclusion, God loves us, to the cause, why we can know that, because Jesus came and died for us. And lastly, we have result and purpose transitions. Now these are very similar to each other and can be easily confused, but result transitions are words like consequently, or so that, or for this reason, while purpose transition are words like in order that, in order to, or so as to. Note, some of these words and phrases can be either purpose or results. You don't need to worry too much about these since they convey nearly the same information. But purpose clauses emphasize the intent behind the effect, while the effect clauses simply have the effect in mind. Both are used to highlight what has happened, but purpose clauses often focus on the why it happened. So some examples of both of these would be Jesus died on the cross in order that we might be saved. Or Jesus claimed that he was the Son of God, and for this reason, he was crucified. Now you can flip either of those around, right? The top one is actually a purpose one. He did it in order that his purpose was that we might be saved. You could say something like Jesus died on the cross so that we're saved. That's just a simple result of his death on the cross. But to emphasize his intent, we would use a more purpose-based transition. Lastly, let's talk about transitioning between paragraphs. An important part of crafting transitions between paragraphs is making sure you have a clear outline before writing your paper. Part of writing an outline is to highlight what information that you are going to use in your argument. And once you know that information, you can begin to link your paragraphs together via transitional phrases. You have to know your reasoning before you begin to write your paper if you want your paper to be clear and convincing. One way of connecting paragraphs and transitions from one point to another is to introduce the next paragraph at the end of your first paragraph, right after your conclusion sentence. You can use certain phrases like, now that we understand blank, let's look at the next topic, right? Or, so, we see that blank, whatever you just concluded, which leads us to our next point, blank. This introduces to your reader how you're shifting from this point to the next point. Sometimes you might need to use some of those transitional phrases to clarify the logic, but it's important to let the reader know we're shifting from point A to point B. You can also start your paragraph with phrases like, because we have already proven blank to be true, now let's go ahead and look at blank. Or in addition to fact number one, fact number two will also support whatever your thesis or conclusion is. The possibilities of these connections are potentially endless, but what is important is that you give a brief explanation as to how all of this information is related to each other. Sometimes the relationship between two given facts is not easily discernible, but it is your job as the writer to make these connections clear. Your conclusion paragraph should help you connect all the dots together, but it is important that you make your logic clear throughout your paper. Don't wait to that conclusion paragraph to then finally do the big reveal. Here's how everything works together. Chances are your readers are not going to pay attention as well if they can't see what you're doing. Even though it may sound good to you to have a final reveal, it is not most helpful for the reader to digest and understand your logic. Ultimately, making your logic clear can be difficult and will require a lot of brain power. But it is important that we do this hard work as early as possible so that we can communicate clearly. Using transitional words within your paper will help you make your logic clear within a given paragraph, and using transitional phrases between paragraphs will help you connect each of your logical conclusions together towards that final conclusion of your paper. Each paragraph should argue for a new piece of information, and your conclusion paragraph should connect all those smaller conclusions to that big final conclusion. But like I said, you don't want to wait until your conclusion paragraph to help make those connections clear. So be sure you're throughout the paper explaining and giving your reader understanding as they're trying to understand your point of view. Thank you for watching this video on transitions and logic. I hope it was helpful to help you clarify your own thoughts in your papers. If you do have any questions, feel free to leave those below. And as always, keep punching out those paragraphs.